with joy or gnash your teeth in despair. What happens to you when you look at a painting may not be at all what the artist who painted it intended to have happen. Millions of people have stood and gazed in open-mouthed wonder at the Mona Lisa. Does anyone know what was going on in Da Vinci's mind when he did it? If he were to come to life again and look at it with his own two eyes, it is dubious in my mind that he would know himself precisely what it was that made him present her in this immortal fashion. In times gone, I used to wonder, on finishing a watercolor that has begun as something utterly different from the product in hand, whether such things happen to real artists as well. I discovered, of course, that it was a fairly common occurrence. It could happen to a Picasso. So what? Think a moment. Is it so very different, this unintentional metamorphosis of a subject, from the more familiar experience of starting out to visit a friend with whom you intend to discuss Bergson or Einstein and winding up in a brothel drunk as a coot? Among painters, as among writers, there are those who stick to their guns, who follow the scent like bloodhounds, as it were, and there are others who sit like birds of prey on some imaginary limb or ledge, ready to pounce on the happy accident which will lead them to some unknown, undreamed-of destination. Each one, in following his native bent, talks a different language. In the end, no matter what language they talk, we get pictures. And eventually the dealers and critics will inform us into which categories the pictures fall, even those which defy categorizing. The astonishing thing is that those who are mocked and jeered at, particularly by their fellow painters, sometimes turned out to be the foremost painters of their time. Usually they were the laughingstocks of the academy, the ones who couldn't be taught, who lacked talent, as they say. To paint is to love again. It's only when we look with eyes of love that we see as the painter sees. His is a love, moreover, which is free of possessiveness. What the painter sees, he is duty-bound to share. Usually he makes us see and feel what ordinarily we ignore or are immune to. His manner of approaching the world tells us, in effect, that nothing is vile or hideous, nothing is stale, flat, and unpalatable, unless it be our own power of vision. To see is not merely to look. One must look, see into and around. Or, as John Marin once put it, art must show what goes on in the world. I remember well the transformation which took place in me when first I began to view the world with the eyes of a painter. The most familiar things, objects which I had gazed at all my life, now became an unending source of wonder, and with the wonder, of course, affection. A teapot, an old hammer, a chipped cup, whatever came to hand, I looked upon as if I had never seen it before. I hadn't, of course. Do not most of us go through life blind, deaf, insensitive? Now, as I studied the object's physiognomy, its texture, its way of speaking, I entered into its life, its history, its purpose, its association with other objects, all of which only endeared it the more. As with humans, I discovered, some kept good company, others bad. Some were happier, more eloquent, when linked with this or that fellow object instead of another. I was never one to worry much about composition, though I knew it was something to be mindful of. Did the objects of my affection look well together? That's all I asked. In other words, were they happy in the arrangement, willed or accidental, in which I found them? Have you ever noticed that the stones one gathers at the beach are grateful when we hold them in our hands and caress them? Do they not take on a new expression? An old pot loves to be rubbed with tenderness and appreciation. So with an axe. Kept in good condition, it always serves its master lovingly. I have always cherished old things, used things, things marked by the passage of time and human events. I think of my own self this way, as something much handled, much knocked about, as worn and polished with use and abuse, as something serviceable, perhaps I should say, more serviceable for having had so many masters, so many wretched, glorious, haphazard experiences and encounters, which explains perhaps why it is that when I start to do a head, it always turns into a self-portrait, even when it becomes a woman, even when it bears no resemblance to me at all. I know myself, my changing faces, my ineradicable Stone Age expression. It's what happened to me that interests me, not resemblances. I am a worn, used creature, an object that loves to be handled, rubbed, caressed, stuffed in a coat pocket, or left to bake in the sun, something to be used or not used, as you like. It's strange that in those years, when I was so eager to lap up everything that had to do with art, when my friend Emil talked glowingly of men like Robert Enright, George Luce, John Sloan, I knew not one outstanding painter. Boardman Robinson, it's true, was a client of my father's, and he looked very much the artist, but I never had the nerve to even mention the word art in his presence. There was also Hans Stengel, a patron of the speakeasy my wife and I ran for a while in the village, but again I was too shy. Besides, we only knew him a few months when he committed suicide. An exception was Frank Harris, another client of the tailoring establishment, but one didn't talk to Frank Harris, one listened. It was marvelous talk, too, which he indulged in, and always on the same three themes: Jesus, Shakespeare, and Oscar Wilde. Perhaps it was just as well that I had no one to confide in. My friends were the masters, most of them dead. I lived with them as Balzac did with the empty frames which adorned the walls of his Passy home in the days when he had nothing but debts and an unlimited imagination. Living with their works, I often wondered what it would be like to have as friends such men as Paul Klee, Marc Chagall, Rouault, Vlaminck. Toward the end of his life, I had occasion to visit Vlaminck at his home in Normandy. It was an unforgettable experience, but too late. In Paris, I got to know Marcel Duchamp, the most civilized man I have ever met, Zadkin the sculptor, Kokoschka, Max Ernst, Soutine, Tiani, Gregory Michons, Ephraim Donner, Hilaire Heiler, Abraham Ratner, Hans Reichel, Benno, the wild man from Borneo, and others. On my return to America, I became friends with Man Ray, Beniamino Buffano, Buford Delaney, Jean Varda, Fernand Léger, Bezalel Schatz, and the adorable, celebrated surgeon, Dr. Marion Souchon of New Orleans, who only began to paint when in his 70s. There's another man I should include here who, like Dr. Souchon, took up painting late in life. That is Meyer Heiler, the father of Hilaire. Everything Meyer Heiler did gave me intense pleasure. A naive painter, as they say, he went at it directly, simply, lovingly, careful to put in every brick, every window, every leaf, every spoke. To my eyes, everything he turned out was a gem, a little masterpiece, which is more than I can say for many of the great painters. As for influences, undoubtedly the Japanese exerted the most profound influence of all. They were the first artists whose work I hung on my walls, and they will probably be the last. Perhaps influence is too presumptuous a word to use in this connection, for certainly my watercolors reflect nothing of their skill, their devotion, or even of their manner of approach. I ought simply and humbly to say that they were my first and most lasting idols. It is they, in my mind, who should be called the masters of reality. masters not only of this floating world, but of all the worlds which go to make up our world.